HannaTalk.
What is up, Rurouni Kenshin fans? Simon here. Welcome to HannaTalk. Hope you're all doing fantastic on this beautiful day right here in Melbourne, Australia, or depending where you are in the world, of course. But today on HannaTalk, I've got a very special guest with me today. Now, he is an actor who is best known to fans as the voice of Anji the Destroyer and various other characters from Rurouni Kenshin back in the 90s, but he's also been best known in shows and projects such as World of Warcraft, Transformers, Cowboy Bebop, Samurai Champloo, Bleach, Lupin III, Digimon, Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, Naruto, Gundam, Hunter x Hunter, Seven Deadly Sins, and so much more. Please welcome the amazing Michael McConnohie.
Oh, fiddle-dee-dee, you're gonna turn my head, you silver-tongued devil.
Well, that's the way it goes, I'm afraid. But how are you, Michael?
Doing very well, thank you. Where I am, we're getting a bit of weather right now. It was supposed to be partly cloudy, and so far we have about 4 inches of partly cloudy on the ground.
I can imagine that, but no, that's good though. Now, obviously, looking back, like during this time with what's been happening with the pandemic over the last few years, and especially now that we've gotten out of the worst of it, how have you been keeping things up, especially on the acting side of things?
Well, like most voice actors, I had to put together a home studio. Now, I'd actually put together a recording space before, mostly for auditions and things like that, so I had a bit of a leg up when the recording landscape changed. And I have to admit, it's worked out pretty darn well. I've got a good, clean sound, and the technology available to the studios now has made it possible to, I can even do dubbing from a remote recording studio. It's pretty intriguing.
I can imagine that, especially like for a lot of voice actors who have had their own home studios. I think long before the pandemic even came about, it's almost like in a way that they were sort of preparing themselves for if that was going to happen. And lo and behold, look what happened just 3 years ago.
Absolutely. And of course, many of us were also girding our loins against things like, podcasts. You need a studio for that. I mean, you can use your phone, I suppose. That's a little tacky, I think.
Well, I've been doing this, of course, for the last 8 years now, and that's all I've really used for that, and it's worked. So yeah, it just depends how you want it to be done, I guess.
No, I mean, from the standpoint of someone who is allegedly a professional in the field.
That's true. That is definitely true. But no, that's fantastic though. Now, let's take a look back at the very beginning of your career and how it all started. How did you get started in acting?
Oh, Mother McCree, that goes all the way back to when I was in 3rd grade in elementary school. It was a school play about Christopher Columbus and his explorations. There's a line from Galaxy Quest where Alan Rickman comments on Tim Allen being adored by the aliens. He says, it's like throwing gasoline on a flame. Yeah, and it was. I mean, this stupid little 3rd grade play totally changed the focus of my life.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. And who or what inspired you really to go into acting, and who would you consider to be like your acting influences?
Well, it's difficult to say, but like any kid growing up, it was cartoons. Cartoons for me. That was my babysitter, because the rents weren't home, so we sat around, and Saturday morning especially, the Saturday morning cartoons back then, that's when they weren't on every day the way they are now. And I learned a lot about my social interactions from cartoons. Fortunately without the pianos and anvils. But once I started growing up and realizing what it is that I wanted to do, we found ourselves in need of something with a little more focus. Now, my family moved around a lot when I was a kid. I mean, a lot. Looking back, it was probably more economic than anything else. But the end result was that from the 1st grade when I dropped out of high school in my junior year, twice, as a matter of fact, later I went back to school kids. But in all that time, I attended 26 different schools.
Wow.
25, I guess, really, because we went back to the same neighborhood and I went back to one school a second time.
That's
But
fantastic.
running around like that, changing life situations constantly, I got to be pretty brash as a defense mechanism. I'm pretty sure I was an insufferable little punk. I know I was a show-off and probably thoroughly detestable, but it did give me a pretty good solid core of strength. But after dropping out of high school the second time, I figured maybe I needed a little self-discipline, and at 17, that's when I enlisted in the Marine Corps and wound up being stationed in Okinawa in Vietnam. I'm sorry, I'm going to go sideways on this just a little bit.
No. That's fantastic. No, that's no problem.
Yeah. There are anime and gaming fans all around the world who are going to be listening to this. And I'm going to ask every one of them to give some consideration to those who have served in the military. My personal charity, and you can see a link to it on the website, is Wounded Warriors. However you can help them or other organizations like them, please make the effort. And I'm going to tell you something for the first time. No one has heard this. The reason for this is that, as it happens, while I was in Vietnam, I got exposed to Agent Orange. We didn't know anything about it back then, of course. And about 40 years later, a little smoldering thing in my blood erupted into multiple myeloma, a form of blood and bone cancer. I had a year of chemo, a stem cell transplant, and I'm grateful beyond words for everything the Veterans Administration here in the U.S. has done for me. I was one of the very, very lucky ones. But there are plenty more who really aren't that fortunate. So wherever you are listening to this, please support whatever organization you can in trying to help our veterans. Because the new guys coming out, they got a long, rough road to hoe. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate that. Okay, end of sermon. Back to the acting history. I really got serious about it when I got out of the Marines in 1973. I started knocking on doors, and one of those doors was a little hole-in-the-wall recording studio in Burbank, California. They were doing the most awful, low-budget, non-union crud you can imagine. But it was work. It was in a studio. I was getting paid zip, but I learned a lot. I got better. I eventually got an agent. And in the meantime, I was doing theater, was in a couple of the bigger live shows at Universal Studios in Hollywood, Castle Dracula and Conan, a Sword and Sorcery Spectacular. Bad guys, both, so that's probably where the foundation was probably laid for a lot of my dubbing. In the mid-'80s, I was incredibly fortunate to get on a few cartoon shows, Transformers, G.I. Joe, a show named Visionaries, Knights of the Magical Light, and a lot of other things. And I wound up rubbing elbows with my personal idols, people who were gods to me, the ones that I'd been listening to when I was a kid on Saturday morning. People like Peter Cullen, Frank Welker, serious dramatic actors like Roscoe Lee Brown, Jonathan Harris, who was Dr. Smith on, oh good God, the brain cell just quit. I'm not going to be able to let that one down. Lost in Space, it came back. Thank you. And tons of the most incredibly talented voice actors and just plain actors in Hollywood. It was a gift beyond my ability to describe, to be accepted in as part of them in this wonderful world.
That is fantastic.
In the mid-'80s, I popped into an audition for a company called Streamline Pictures, for a man called Carl Masick. And that is where anime, in its American form, was really born. Back then, we called it Japanimation. not the slightest hint that it would become a worldwide phenomenon. And that led to games and dubbing and films like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, all sorts of things. And, a short 45 years later, here we are.
Wow, that is absolutely fantastic, and I think that's fantastic of you. Like, obviously, like telling the story about like your time as a veteran and everything. Which all the listeners out there, be sure to go to whatever organization that you feel very strongly about with military ties and support the veterans, because they really do so much for us. Not just in the sense from the States, but also the same thing with here in Australia as well. So definitely. So give you a chance to help out those who've fought for us over this time. And I think that's fantastic in the fact of like how you obviously had your start from a lot of cartoons at that time with obviously actors like Frank Welker, Peter Cullen, who you would eventually go on to work alongside with, or in the franchises that became so well known for, like in series like Transformers, all that kind of stuff, which is just fantastic.
It was utterly amazing to me because if you're going to be an actor, I believe first you really need to be a fan.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't have a feeling for it, why do it? And to breathe the same air with people who quite honestly helped me get through my childhood. And then these days when I'm at a convention or something, and someone will come up to me, and they'll say the same thing to me. You don't know what you meant to me as a kid. I was kind of all by myself, and you were my friend. You were the one who helped guide me.
Wow.
And this is freaky enough. But when it's somebody who's got gray whiskers in his beard saying it, it's a little left-handed. But it's true. This form of entertainment in all its myriad permutations affects people so deeply. And it's really humbling to understand just how much people are involved in the things we do.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely true. And especially like I've said this across in many interviews that I've done over the last 8 years of my life, and I will say this till the day I die. If people were to come up to ask me and say, why do you still go to comic conventions in particular? I say I go to meet the voice actors in particular. They are my rock stars right there.
And I'm right there with you.
Absolutely.
Because at a convention, I get a chance to meet people I wouldn't necessarily have met because we didn't have the opportunity to work together. But there was a time back in the 90s, I was working with a gaming company called Interplay. They've long since gone away and turned to dust because they had not one clue what they were doing. But I came in to help them, and I was getting talent for them, and actors and all of that, and they came to me and said, look, you know what you're doing. Would you mind directing some people for us? Sure, not a problem. I've directed before, should be okay.
Wow.
The original cast of Star Trek. We did 2 games, back then we called them CD-ROMs, with Shatner, Nimoy, Nichelle Nichols, George Takei, Walter Koenig, James Doohan, the original super gods from outer space. And I got a chance to do both of the games with them, and they were most gracious. And I was being very professional, but inside I was just quivering. Because how often in a life do you get an opportunity like that?
That is amazing. Wow, that is absolutely fantastic. And it's definitely true. Like, you were there in sort of that professional capacity to direct, like, to be involved in, like, one of the biggest science fiction franchises of that time. And yeah, they're in a professional capacity, but also at the same time having that fanboy moment as well. And do you still have moments like that for like any of the directing opportunities that you've had?
Not so much, because as I got older and had, some gray whiskers of my own, I got a little more time in grade, as we call it. Um, a little more comfortable in my own skin and a little more sure of my place in the cosmos. Um, but I've never lost the admiration. And occasionally, not often, an anime project will bring in a special actor, and that's always fun. Always fun.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely fantastic. That is really wonderful. Now, looking back across at like your entire career or any project that you do now, do you walk into a series or a project expecting to play like a certain role, or is it like a jack in the box, like walking up and not knowing what to expect when you push the button or turn the handle?
Well, you can expect to audition for a particular role, but there are a whole lot of other people planning on getting that same role. Sometimes when a studio gets to know you and what you can do, they'll just call you in and say, "We have this thing we want you to do." And that's fabulous. It takes, some time to get to that point. But once you do, it takes a lot of the strain out of the acting and audition process. I mean, in general, here in the States anyway, at any given time, 97% of professional actors are unemployed. That's the competition. They're like Screen Actors Guild, SAG-AFTRA, something at this point like 250,000 members. And at any given day, 97% of them are not working.
Wow.
The competition is incredible, and with everyone having home studios now, the field is wide open. And for a commercial or something where you would have expected to go in with maybe 6 or 8 other people and read for it, they'll be getting submissions not just from all over the country, but all over the world. So there may be hundreds, if not thousands, of submissions for one little job. It's tough stuff.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely true on that, especially like from what I've seen from the posts from like fellow voice actors who I'm friends with, of course, and have been friends with for these last few years, who've spoken about obviously because of the strikes that are happening in the States right now with the actors strike and the writers strike, and people bombarding them with questions about what's going on with the voice actors in this case, and they said they belong to a different union that's not part of that same sort of thing. But yeah, it's pretty crazy actually.
There are different contracts for different things, and the theatrical contract that would be TV and films. That would be the primary one for screen actors at this time. And the writers, they have an awful lot to protect, and that's pretty much television and film. Voiceover is a little different. We're okay for um, video games and animation and so forth, and that depends a lot on what the jurisdiction is script-wise for animation. Some of them are guild houses, some are not, but just in general, dubbing just keeps chugging along, and
Wow.
it's a strain, it's an emotional strain, because those of us who are close enough, we'll go out and we'll walk a picket line and support our brothers who are really out of work. Um, but as a group, it's a good thing we have thick skins and never really know when to quit. We always
Absolutely.
try to support each other, especially in dubbing. And we've got a beautifully solid community of allies and friends. And because we've all been there for a very long time, we know what it was like and how it continues to be to this day. We take nothing for granted other than our place in our community of friends and colleagues.
That's fantastic. No, that's absolutely wonderful, and that's definitely true. How, in times of moments like this, is that you really need to stand up and support each other in times like this, especially as you described it as well. And if people were to ask me, and I've had this people asking me constantly, is like, why did you start Hannah Talk in the first place? And you've been doing it for the last 8 years. I said, one, it's to show off another side of myself, and two, it's primarily just to give my support to the animation and the voice acting industry because of how much you people like yourself, the actors I've interviewed over the last 8 years, and will continue to do so to the end of time, have meant so much to me growing up. So just doing my bit to show my support.
Well, and it is deeply appreciated because the difference between what we do and, say, for instance, when I'm doing a stage play. If you're doing a play, you're on the stage in the theater. You can feel the audience. You can hear them breathing. You can see their reactions. You know when they're with you and when they're not. And when you get it right and they are truly affected, they're going to give you back all of the energy you need to know that you have done good work and you are appreciated. When you're sitting in a dark room with a set of headphones on and looking at a TV screen and your director's in another room talking to you through an intercom, you don't get that payback. You never really know what it's going to be like until later on. You meet someone who's seen what you've done. And whenever I get a chance to meet fans, it is always a golden opportunity for me because in their eyes, I can see, yes, what I did is it helped them. They enjoyed it. I did a good thing. This is pretty damn cool.
No, absolutely, and we honestly feel the same about you and all the other voice actors that have done so much for our childhood and for animation just in general, and for voice acting, and just keep that up. And we know that future generations are going to absolutely love it.
Well, the bottom line is, without an audience, we're just talking to ourselves. Without you, quite truly, we're nothing. And who wants to be nothing?
Absolutely. Definitely, absolutely, and that's absolutely fantastic. Now, of course, as many anime fans will know, that typically a lot of anime is based on manga. Have you ever read the manga for any particular series that you've worked on, or ever became familiar or heard of a project before you started working on that series?
To be honest, no. And here I'm going to go back to William Shatner. There's I think it was the fourth movie, The Voyage Home, the one with the whales, where the lady says, oh, so you're from outer space? He says, no, I'm from Iowa. I just work in outer space. And there are a lot of actors who delve really deeply into the entire culture. Crispin Freeman is amazing in that regard. At this point, I don't know if he's fluent in Japanese or not, but he studies it. He goes through the manga. He looks at the sources for whatever he's working on.
Absolutely.
And that is some dedication and focus, to be quite honest, I don't have. It's sort of like, it's where I work. And I don't generally do that kind of research anymore. But for him, it's not research. He's in dubbing because he's into that culture, not the other way around. And there are
Wow.
a lot of people who have the same thing. And that's why there are so many anime and pop culture clubs around, because there are that many people who really, really
Absolutely, and I think that's definitely true in that sense because it's like looking back at a couple of the interviews that I did before, where you've got actors, for example, like Aaron Roberts and Amber Lee Connors, who are huge fans of the material, and Crispin Freeman, as you mentioned, that know ahead of time, like when they get involved into a certain project they've read about, it's like, oh, great. They know what the story's about, they know what the character is, but on the other side of that equation, you've also got actors like Joshua Seth, who many people remember from the Digimon universe, where I remember this interview that I did with him a few years back during the pandemic, where he spoke about this one advice he got from one actor. He said to him, don't read ahead, just go in there completely surprised.
That's kind of the way I go.
Absolutely.
It is a voyage of discovery that I think brings a different kind of energy to it. You can certainly try different things and see what other flavors you can wring out of a particular scene or piece of dialogue. But if you do too much prep, it gets a little stale. At least that's the case for me. The sense of discovery helps me feel that I'm bringing it more alive.
Absolutely, and that's definitely fantastic, and that is amazing. Now, obviously, for like any sort of series where your character is like a main character or is featured prominently across the series, do you have an idea for where your character is going in terms of its story or its character arc, or is everything recorded out of context?
Pretty generally, it's out of context. We never have the opportunity to read a whole script. You go to this page, go to this page, go to this page, go to this page. You might have them play the scene for you, so you get a feeling for kind of where it's headed and what the characters are doing in the original performance, so you can try and match that in terms of the emotional content. But as far as what's going to happen, not just in that episode, but later on in the entire storyline, no. That's the difference between dubbing and original animation. Generally with original animation, before they ever start even writing the scripts, they write a Bible. This is what the characters are like. This is what their motivations are. This is what they're after. We're going to have this general situation, and the story is going to move from here to here to here to here to here.
Wow.
And there's an awful lot of work that goes into it. And then when you hit the studio, and the writers have done their scripts, and the director has gone through the script, and he has the Bible, and then he has a chance, or she, damn, I don't mean to be sexist. I've had some very good lady directors, by the way. Mary Elizabeth Lynn is just, she was wonderful. She's now living somewhere pretty and tropical. As she ought to be, because she's pretty and tropical. Good God, I lost my whole trail. Where was I going? Help me, throw me a line here.
Yeah, I think it was just basically talking about like original animation work, how they
Yes, okay, through a line and knowing in advance in the storyline and all that. See, I know I found my way back on the track. That is not the case with dubbing because the time pressure. It is only getting worse. Back when they were still in business, Funimation became Crunchyroll now. What are they now?
I think it's probably still.
They're now Crunchyroll. I think they wound up as Crunchyroll.
Yes. Yes.
Their studios were in Texas. They had 10 sound stages, 10 studios, working simultaneously. They could do a series, a whole season, in 3 weeks. The actors would go from one studio to another to work on different scripts. It was an incredible is if you're working that fast and people do get a little tired, there were some incredible things that came out of there. I mean, Full Metal Alchemist just kicked butt, and a lot of other shows as well. So it isn't that the work was in any way bad, but by and large, to meet that sort of demand, you've got to take a few shortcuts. So maybe not as many takes. So maybe not as much time spent writing the script to make sure that the flaps and the mouth movements are matching up correctly, because if you start and stop at the right times, it's probably close enough. And given the fact that most of the original animation from Japan, performance is paramount. This sync stuff doesn't really enter into it for them. There are some studios and productions where it is more that way. But by and large, their tradition is the performance is what's going to carry it. And if you're worried about some little technical thing, you shouldn't be watching.
That's definitely true, and I think that's absolutely fantastic in that regard. And especially like when you look at a lot of like anime that we've had over just recently, or in the last couple of years, compared to back then, is that a lot of them tend to just be like one and done kind of anime series, and not necessarily trying to turn themselves into the next Pokemon or Digimon or Bleach or JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, or build out into these really big franchises in some way, and even shorter episodes as well compared to what they were back then. So yeah.
It's strictly a matter of feeding the monster, which is the market. Get it more, get it faster, get it done.
Absolutely. Now, of course, like, what was like your first voiceover role?
Okay, I mentioned that funky little studio in Burbank.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I went in there, the first thing I ever worked on as a voice actor was something called The Legend of Alfred Packer. It's a Western thing about a guy who was leading pioneers out west, and, when it got to a nice quiet area, he'd kill them and dig the gold out of their teeth.
What?
Hey, it's a living. And I went in and said, "Oh, come on in here, kid. We'll put you to work." And they did. And I am all over that film. I am here, I am there. I'm high, I'm low. And I was not very good.
Wow.
But it was a low bid studio, and it was low bid work, but I learned so much. It was in a studio. I learned how the thing works. I learned how, and this was before digital editing, by the way. So you kind of had to get it really, really, really freaking close, or you did it again, or you did it again. By the way, has anyone ever told you where the term looping came from, or why we say, we're dubbing and I have to do this loop and that loop?
I think it has been mentioned before in past interviews, but yeah, maybe before in past interviews, but it's been a while since I've looked back at a term like that.
Way back when it was when dubbing and recording was done to try to get sync, they would cut an actual loop of film, put it in the projector, and just let it cycle through and cycle through and cycle through and cycle through until they got a match with the picture. And that was major motion pictures. I mean, post-production now cleans up such an amazing amount of problems. Probably 60% of what you see on TV is actually looped after the fact. Production sound is notorious. You may get, kids screaming across the street, or traffic noise, or it's just a low-level recording or whatever. But working with this loop is where that term came from. And oh gosh, somewhere back in the late 80s, early 90s, I got called into a little film in Hollywood, and it was an old-style recording studio, an old-style post-production studio. And they had a projector, and they were running loops of film. This thing looked like a Buick standing on its nose. It was about that big.
Wow.
Noisiest son of a gun I've ever seen. And this little gnarled gnome of a projectionist running the thing. And we started working on this thing, and it took forever to set up, took it forever to run. And we were getting something like between 10 and 12 loops an hour completed. And they were good with that.
That is remarkable. That is absolutely crazy. But it's just...
It is. The mean accomplishment level now is somewhere between 30 and 40 loops an hour.
Wow, that is absolutely insane. And especially as you described it, like how post-production now compared to like the looping stages that was back then, like takes care of pretty much all of that in a little bit of a shorter period of time compared to like what it was back then, which is insane. But I think it's great that you saw that first voiceover role that you did, like how you learned the ins and outs of being in the voiceover industry and understanding those aspects of it to further enhance your career down the track, which is fantastic.
And I didn't see a thing there that told me that I shouldn't do it. So there.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. Now, we've got ourselves a fan question here from Cameron Stephen. Shout out to you, mate, for an awesome question, who says this: I love Cowboy Bebop, and I've been meaning to watch Samurai Champloo for quite a while now. And his question is, what kind of preparation do you do for your voice prior to any vocal performances?
Well, it depends on the role, and these days, quite honestly, as I'm tiptoeing past a few mile markers age-wise, I need to be a little more careful of my instrument. I did had a little illness last year, and a little respiratory thing. Okay, fine, you know, you get it, and then you get rid of it, and you go back to work. My voice has never come back. It's at least not except in short bursts. So there are standard actor vocal warm-ups, and plenty of exercises you can do. And in the studio, we have lots of little unguents and preparations, little Japanese packets of sticky loquat juice, and a tea called throat coat, which is made from the bark of a slippery elm tree, and it helps fill in places on your vocal cords when you've been doing entirely too much and it's getting dry and a little crackly. There are all sorts of things which will assist, but by far the most important thing, and this is nothing any actor will ever do, is get enough rest.
No,
We don't do that.
absolutely.
We don't do that. So, Samurai Champloo, I love Monzo the Saw. Oh, mother, I love that character. It's like an old 40s noir detective. Just such fun.
Absolutely. No, that is absolutely fantastic. And thank you to Cameron for an awesome question, by the way. And all the listeners out there, every time I post up what interview or what I'm going to be doing on HannaTalk, be sure to post down below if you have any fan questions or comments for any interviews that I do going forward. And I'll be sure to give a special shout out to every person that has asked a question, because this is Fantastic. Absolutely amazing. So now going across into your roles, now one of the roles that was actually my intro to your work was from an anime called Mechen Awakens Romance, or Mea, where you were the voice of Babo. What was it like to work on that series?
Oh, that was just great fun. It was done at a studio called PCB, and they do dubbing, and they do the games, and very great friends with the people running the place. And this one, Babo is probably one of the most visually interesting characters I've ever done. He's got a face sort of like the Tin Man from Wizard of Oz, crossed with Don Quixote from Man of La Mancha. And that's actually kind of where I tried to place the character with him, because he is a little disingenuous. He's a little, actually, I mean, ingenuous. He wasn't disingenuous because he really looked at things in a positive light, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to help that, and we can do this, and isn't it going to be fun? And you haven't lived until you've seen stainless steel basketball dangling a chain, jumping around, saying, come on, let's do this. It was a wonderful little character, and I just truly enjoyed that so much.
Absolutely. That is fantastic. And I remember, because that was one of the first, like, my intro to your work at the time, and I watched the English dub quite a fair bit whenever it was on TV at the time, and I thought that you and all the actors across the board did a fantastic job in the series, and it was such a shame that, unfortunately, the English dub never got finished at that time. But if there was ever the chance for, like, a revival series, is that something you'd want to see them do, like a revival series of Mechen Awakens Romance?
Oh, sure. That would be, count me in. I'll be in line.
Absolutely. That would be fantastic.
And another one did some games there. The Disgaea games with Captain Gordon, 37th and a half Defender of the Universe. That was a weird series of interesting characters and situations in a game, and I don't think I've ever seen a game that went that close to being a comedy series. It was, I really enjoyed it.
That is fantastic. No, that's absolutely wonderful. Now, the other role that was my intro, that was also another intro to your work, was the role of Anji the Destroyer and Nenji from the original Rurouni Kenshin series back in the 90s. What was it like working on Rurouni Kenshin?
Okay, that was, I believe that was, where did we do that? Because there were actually two versions. There was Samurai X.
Yes.
Which is really hard to find. But the two, I'm not even going to call the second version of the series a reboot. The first one was, I think it was Sony that was doing that. And they just wanted to get a nice, fun bit of product out, and so they told everyone, have fun with it. And the director was also the writer for most of the episodes, Michael Sorich, who is an absolute insane man. I love him to death. He's utterly exhausting. You can't turn him off. And his sense of humor is wild. And so, here we are, in Tokyo, in the Edo district, and here come the local constabulary. And they're dressed in traditional Japanese garb. They're wearing their swords. And because they're policemen, they're all talking with an Irish accent. It was hysterical. Oh, fans went nuts. No, no, that's not it. And I'm afraid that the Samurai X version slipped off into the cover of darkness somewhere. And then, 2 years later, I think, something like that, Rurouni Kenshin started being recorded. And interestingly, Richard Kensino
Yes.
was the same voice for Kenshin in both versions. And he's a nut job too. He did a really, really good job of the role. Anji was, oh man, he's tightly wound, you think. A warrior monk and basically living for vengeance and, okay, I'm gonna kill you all, but it's fair because, you did that. That's okay. I'm gonna bring your government down and all your little political houses too. And he was, I wouldn't call him straight ahead, but he was, determination doesn't come anywhere close enough to describing what drove him. This was my impression when I was doing it. And this is actually one of the cases where I would have liked to have had a little more background on the character. But it was a case of, again, the clock's ticking, gotta get it done. And Nenji, Okina. That's patented old croc character number 3B. Total nut job. And actually in the in Samurai X, my lady Melody Spivak was Misao. And that's interesting because she's nothing like a little girl. And then in the latter version, when I'm being Okina, and I kept expecting her voice to come out of Misao, but it didn't happen because, she wasn't Misao anymore, someone else was. But Okina was, he would switch 180 degrees from the absolute prototypical nut job, get out of the way, old sucker, to don't get in his way because, he's probably going to take you down in pieces.
Absolutely.
And I love the way that he changed completely, and sometimes, as I recall, there were a couple of times when he maintained his senior humor while dismantling someone, and that was okay too.
No, that is fantastic.
The drinking into girls, that counts for a lot too.
No, that is absolutely fantastic. And I will honestly have to say straight off the bat, and especially now rewatching the original anime series itself, and I thought that you did a fantastic job as Anji and as Okina in the series, and all the artists across the board did an amazing job during the show. It was so fantastic.
Thank you very much. It was one of the things, again, that was one of the shows where so many people came through on it that a lot of the community got to actually see each other. I mean, mostly en passant as we were going in and out of the studio. But we got the occasional chance to see someone we wouldn't have seen before in going in and out of the little dark room with the headphones. And later we'd maybe get together and say, well, that was weird. That was weird. Did you like it? Yeah, I think I did. Well, good.
No, that is just fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. Now, as we've also spoken a little bit about before, we've also had the reboot series, which just came out fairly recently. What's been your opinion on anime being rebooted?
Yeah, my opinion is very much like, why does Disney keep remaking its own films? It was pretty good the first time around. Does no one have any imagination anymore? I suppose a point can be made that, well, you know, it's like the $6 million man. We can make him better than he was. Well, you don't need to. Most times, I think that's the case. That reboots,
Well,
I don't see it. I don't appreciate it. Even in live action, there's one of the streamers is doing. They've got a reboot of The Tick, and I can't watch it because I saw the original, and there was only one tick for me. It was done well the first time. It didn't find its audience, and that's a shame.
wow. No, no. I think just based on that, I think though is that I personally think that like with the rebooted Rurouni Kenshin series, is that in the way the original series didn't fully adapt the story from the manga in its entirety because it wasn't completely finished around that time. This is sort of them sort of like doing the Fruits Basket or Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood situation, saying, okay, let's do this series and let's adapt the original story in its entirety this time. And
Well, now you're talking about a different aspect entirely.
that's the way I see it personally, which reboots can be absolutely fantastic, or they can be like swing in the other direction entirely. It's just a matter of perspective, I guess, and just like looking at it is just like one interpretation, I guess.
If you can find and mine new material, bring original storyline back that was never gone into before, that's a valid reason, I feel.
Absolutely.
But just to say, oh, that worked the first time, let's do it again. Why?
No, absolutely. I think that's definitely true in that regard. Is just like, and that's the how I see the Rurouni Kenshin reboot series in them basically like adapting the story from the manga in its entirety this time and being way more faithful to the story than the first series was. Even though the first series is still absolutely fantastic, and it's still a very special place to a lot of people. It's like, okay, we see them doing the Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood series and the Fruits Basket type of situation where they're adapting, rebooting those stories from the first time round, but this time adapting the story in its entirety and trying to be way more faithful to it than the first time round. So it's just a matter of perspective, I guess, and I think that's fantastic though. But also at the same time, it's getting it open to anyone that's never watched any of those shows and see, oh wow, this is an awesome series. And it's the first time I've ever heard of this character. I'll watch it. Oh, there's a first one? I'll go back and watch that one after I see this one. So,
And when you can preserve the art or bring the art back out into the light of the original story that was elided and basically trimmed because it slowed down the story, whatever the thinking was. That's marvelously ambitious.
absolutely, and that is definitely true. Now looking across like the other shows and projects you've worked on, you've also played across franchises and shows like the ones I've mentioned about before, like Lupin Third, Transformers, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Bleach, Cowboy Bebop, Samurai Champloo, and all those types. What was it like to work across all these different projects and franchises?
Well, the short answer is, and you'll hear this a lot, it was a ton of fun. They just really ran the gamut, and some of those franchises continue to this day. Lupin the Third, that was just a bunch of nut stuff. And part of the reason for that is every time I was working on it, I had to keep restraining myself because the character of Lupin looks like my friend Bob Bergen, who does the voice of Porky Pig and a lot of other Warner Brothers cartoons. I mean, it really looks like Bob Bergen.
Wow.
And Bob has got the same skewed sense of humor as Lupin does. And I think in, what was it, Castle of Cagliostro, I got to be the nasty bad guy up against him, and it was difficult to work because it wasn't Bob doing the voice, but it was Bob on the screen. And I was waiting to hear Porky come out with his tagline. I was just, oh, weird. So I love that. Gundam, I've been in a few of those. I think probably I think it was what Gundam Mobile Unity. I lost the word again.
I think it was. I think it was probably from the Mobile Unit series. I think there have been
Mobile
so.
Unit, yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Mobile
That's
Unity.
it.
Yeah, Norris Packard. I had the word there. I just didn't trust myself. I enjoyed that. I really was satisfied with how they cast me in that because I loved the steel in his spine and the fact that he had a dedication to what he was doing, and I didn't have to get too histrionic. And after a while, you've been around long enough, you get known for a few signature things. You know, yeah, you need a gravelly bad guy, get McConnohie. You know, you need a big stentorian announcer, get McConnohie. But you get someone who's just being a person, it makes a huge difference. And Packard was that way for me.
That is fantastic, and it's definitely true because in that fact, like obviously, when you obviously went to comic conventions and you've had fans come up to you and recognize you for like roles and stuff, have they ever like said to you that they recognized you from roles that you would never have expected?
Oh, constantly. The other side of that, I said, wait, you did that? Yeah. But it's sometimes I just had to pick up my chin and close my mouth because someone brought me a VHS. I can't recall what it was now at this point, but it was something that I had done like 30 years previously.
Wow.
And they just loved it. It was like, wow, you have just made my entire day. Thank you so much. Because yeah, it was work and it was fun and it was done and then I left. And 30 years later, it's still living in your heart. What an incredible gift. Thank you.
That is fantastic. No, that is absolutely wonderful. And it's really fantastic that a lot of people would still would come to you for roles that you would never have expected, even for the ones and also still recognized for the roles that you'd still be well known for to this day forward, which is absolutely fantastic. It reminds me a lot of like Alec Guinness' story, who many people remember as Obi-Wan Kenobi from the original Star Wars movies, and that he was a well-known actor before he started doing those roles, but he would constantly only get recognized for Star Wars and not so much for his other work. So it can be a bit of a double-edged sword sometimes, but I think in the fact of just being I think I remember one actor who spoke about this. I think it was an interview with Christian Bale where he spoke about that if he was only going to be remembered for playing Batman in the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, he would totally be satisfied with that.
Yep.
Absolutely, which is just fantastic. Now, just a bit of interesting trivia, just to mention this about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Now, for any people out there that don't know, and especially for a lot of Australian listeners out there, especially Savage Garden fans, Savage Garden is an Australian music duo which comprises of Darren Hayes and Daniel Johns. One of their songs actually got featured in season 4 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the full-on track and everything, the way that they recorded the song back in the 90s. And I first heard about that when Darren Hayes spoke about it, which I thought was fantastic.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Absolutely. So Australia, represent. But no, that's absolutely wonderful. And speaking a little bit further on one of the other shows, which is Bleach, what was it like to come back into the world of Bleach through the Thousand Year Blood War revival series?
Well, it was two things. It was a little weird, and it was also like, nice comfy slippers. I'll just put this on and feel good. The time in between, production-wise for us, was interesting in that so much happens in such a small amount of time in the industry. And it's like, a year, 2 years, it's like eons. And what was I doing? What did Enma sound like? And I play things that, really? Okay. And what about these guys? What's happened? What are they doing? What are their motivations? Okay. All right. Well, let's get in here and start cranking. And it was such an incredible panoply of characters I got to do in that, in both sections, both realities. It was Ishida, Kuroto, Shalon Kufang, Toshimori, Yosu, Shogunahiko, Paragon, Luisenbarn, and just, I don't know how many others. That's a lot of characters to bring to life. And it was daunting. I mean, of course, we can all do anything. We're capable of moving the world. Just give me a lever. But I was all over that place, and it was really, really interesting. And that is one of the shows that actually made me tired.
Wow, that is fantastic. And especially because of the fact that, like, when the original Bleach series had ended, it's like they ended on such a really good way that, like, sort of was a really good ending to the series as a whole, but still left it open for them to come back if they felt like they had more story to tell. And that's when we found out about the manga still continuing on at that time. It's like, okay, are they going to do this? Are they going to adapt this? And then cut to 2023 or 2022, here we are with the revival series, just picking up basically where they left off, but with better animation and with most, if not all, the original actors coming back, which is just fantastic.
Yeah, and I misspoke earlier. I mentioned Enma. No, he was in Naruto, the other thing. I know the difference. I really do.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. And looking back across at like your entire career, what would you say has been like the one role that sort of resonates with you the most?
Actually, there are a couple of them, but the one that really sticks with me is Gungrave. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I don't think so, no.
It was a sort of a modern crime anime, not a period piece at all. My character was a guy named Big Daddy. He's the head of a crime syndicate. Probably the hardest dubbing job I've ever done in my life because it was so grounded and real. An older man in love with a younger woman, and his heart breaks every time he sees her with the man she really loves, who is a young fellow he's brought into his organization. And every episode, you just see him crumble a little more and a little more and a little more. And there was no screaming, there was no yelling, there was no excitement, there was no fighting. There was just this man with a broken heart slowly coming apart.
Wow, that is...
That one just sticks with me.
That is fantastic. No, that is absolutely wonderful. Now, obviously, we've spoken a little bit about, like, obviously the voice acting in the animation industry, and especially within the entertainment industry a little bit. But if you could change one thing about the entertainment industry, what would that be?
Well, okay. Let's deal with what I consider to be the cancer on the industry, which is greed. Who cares about the art? Let's make some money. One example in the Transformers live movies, the very first one, the producers beforehand went on about how they loved the Transformers, grew up with them, and the heart of that reality is what they wanted to maintain. And then in the very first film, they turned Bumblebee, the sweet little Volkswagen, into a freaking muscle car. And the movie was giant frickin' robots fighting. There's a line in the Batman movie. Jack Nicholson, as the Joker, says, "This city needs an enema." Well, so does the entertainment industry. Let's think less about how many more bonuses we can score and a little more about putting our heart and art back into entertainment. I don't mind explosions. I enjoy them every once in a while. That's fine. That's mindless fun. But how about something which is also touching the heartstrings a little bit? Something which is a little more reassuring. Something which isn't just the biggest, loudest, most surprising thing you can do. It doesn't need to be. I mean, you want to see some real entertainment? Go to the theater and see something live on stage. I go back to what I said earlier. And the thing about stage is that's something that they haven't found a way to clone with AI yet.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely true in that regard. And obviously we've now started to see that, of course, with the latest Transformers movies, where they've gone back to that sort of original idea. Especially, the best example is, of course, the Bumblebee movie, and now with the Rise of the Beast movies, of course, and especially with them doing like a reboot, obviously, of the G.I. Joe films, but sort of going back to that idea of like what was originally supposed to happen for the live-action Transformers movies, in that I think originally Steven Spielberg was meant to be in charge of the entire franchise himself before they brought Michael Bay onto the projects. So it's sort of them going back to basics a little bit with that. And I think you'll definitely hit the nail on the head with that, is that, yes, the explosions and all that kind of stuff is great and everything, but let's bring it back to the heart of this and pulling at the heartstrings and stuff. I think that's definitely fantastic, and something that I think the industry needs to go back to, not just with film, but with pretty much anything really. It's fantastic.
It's when at conventions, I'm often asked, what is it that makes you feel good about what you did on the Transformers? And to me, I always say, yes, they're robots. Yes, they are cybernetic organisms, but they have heart.
Absolutely.
They feel, they empathize, they have a sense of right and wrong. And that is something that was in the entire series. Yes, there was silly stuff, and yes, there was all the usual fights and everything, because you need that in cartoons. But by and large, the reason for fighting was a solid motivation to do good.
Absolutely, and that is absolutely fantastic. But just a bit of a question to all the listeners out there. Let me know in the comments, what do you want to see in the future with the Transformers franchise, and leave a like or a comment if you really want to see Michael McConnohie make a Stan Lee cameo in the live action Transformers movies, because that would be amazing.
That would be a non-Borel event. It would, yeah, I would eat it up with a spoon. And I think when we were first talking in the voice community about the film coming out, we were saying, wouldn't it be great if they just got all of the original voice actors to do cameos? I mean, that would have been outstanding. You know, someone reading a newspaper or talking at a cafe or something. It would have been great. And thank you. I think that is an excellent idea, and you shall get a gold star for coming up with it.
Well, I came up with it more than a few times, of course, and yep, I will do what I can to try to make that happen as best as I could. And the same with any Transformers fans out there as well. And not just for the Transformers, but also with a lot of the live action anime adaptations out there as well, is like, get the original voice actors to make like cameos in those productions, because they've meant so much to people and they're synonymous with the legacy of those series. Let's get them in there. That's what I believe anyway. So yeah.
Well, I'm willing to believe it with you.
Thank you so much. Now, without going into any spoilers, what's next for Michael McConnohie for the fans to know about?
Well, life is a constant surprise. And as I've said earlier, we never really know what's coming up. So even if I did have some spoilers, the NDAs we have to sign to keep me from sharing them. But there's nothing boiling in the pot right now. I'm just waiting to see what life brings. I've been working long enough. I've done my scrambling up the ladder. And at this point, I'm quite willing just to sit back with an open mind and see what crops up. At this point, I'm now several years old. And I've been doing this now professionally for 45 years. 47.
Wow.
That's a long run. That is a long run. I have been an incredibly fortunate guy. The opportunities I've had, the people I've met, the things that I've been privileged to be a part of, I wouldn't trade any of it for anything.
Absolutely. No, that is absolutely fantastic. That is just wonderful. And final question, what do you think Anji would say if he was in Australia?
Well, as we know, he's always got a cause. Don't you people understand? Don't talk to me about ruse or drop bears. This mighty nation must join me to avenge the penguins.
No, that is fantastic. Wow.
That is one of my absolute beauty memories from my one trip to Melbourne. Was sitting there on the bleachers, watching those little penguins come in the evening. It is just absolutely precious. And for anyone who hasn't been there, every night when they come in from feeding themselves, they're distended, like chalked up to their beaks, full of fish. And they come waddling across the sand. They fall over because their stomachs are so heavy. They are incredibly cute and wonderful and funny. And they just walk right on by. There are bleachers set up where you can sit there and look. And they have their little channel, which is cleared for them, so they can go back home and have a nap. And I love the penguins. And Anji does too.
No, that is absolutely fantastic. That is wonderful. Michael McConnohie, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor.
Oh, thank you so much. I've really, truly enjoyed this, and I appreciate that you've spent so much time with me.
Absolutely.
And I hope I don't give you too much editing.
No. This is absolutely fantastic, and this is what I do. Just doing my bit to show my support to the voice acting and the animation industry, and that's why I've been doing this for the last 8-9 years of my life now. So yeah. And
Simon, you are a bright spot on this landscape that we call the internet.
Thank you so much, man. And is there anything you would like to say to the fans out there in Australia and in the world?
Well, other than I would like to see you all again. It's stupid, but I'm going to quote Bill and Ted. Be most excellent to each other. There's no reason to be a dick. A little gentleness, a little understanding, and if someone could use some help, give it to them. And we'll all be much, much better off for it. So, do that, please.
Absolutely, that is fantastic. Well, guys, if you'd like to find out more about Michael McConnohie, you can check out the links which I'll put to in the description below once this interview is up later today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click that bell, check out the links, and don't forget to comment below for any requests or suggestions in the future. Thank you all so much for listening. This is Simon and Michael McConnohie signing off. Bye for now.
Bye, y'all.